everyone, my name is Kaylee and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Okay everybody, welcome to Storytime Smash Sunday. I know I didn't post one last week. I'm still getting used to the 2 videos a week. I'm sorry, but I'm here now, okay? So last time I had asked you guys what you guys thought of me, like looking up scary stories and just putting them in the Storytime Smash videos for the month of October, obviously spooky season. And a lot of you guys like the idea, so we are going to do a bunch of scary stories. And this is the makeup look that I'm going to be trying to do today. Let's hope that I don't butcher it. Let's really hope. But other than that, let's get into today's story times. I'm going to bring you guys up close. There we go. Okay, by the way, my nails, they're looking nasty right now, so don't mind them. Okay. By the way, these story times that I'm going to be reading to you guys, I'll have the website to them linked in the description. But for those of you who may be new here, I'm going to do my quick usual little rundown. For most of the video, I will be looking in this direction because my mirror's over here and I would like to see what I'm doing. I do tell these story times in a first person point of view, so if you don't like that, then you can leave.
There's the door.
And these story times are sent in by anonymous people. Okay, let's get into these scary stories. Okay, so story time about room number 4. So a little background information. I was fresh out of nursing school when I got my first job in a pretty big hospital in a department that I really never thought that I would ever work in. And it was a 6-bed cardiac ICU. Don't worry, I'm gonna tell you guys what that is. Hold on. It's an intensive care unit for people with heart problems. I mean, it was nice though. It had windows that overlooked the city capitol building. So I started out working 12-hour shifts, and the hospital that I worked at had 4 ICUs. And all of them were always full. So my unit always ended up being a code bed, which pretty much means that the beds we had were kept open for like an immediate emergency type of thing. Like if somebody had been arrested and, you know, they need to go to the hospital quickly, something like that. Okay, I think you guys get it. But anyways, I had been working there for a year and I was no stranger to death. Each patient of mine who had died on my shift was usually already on their way out. Like half of the time, these people literally, their families were already by their side. They already knew what was going to happen. The DNR was signed. Do not revive. They already had the funeral home picked out and everything. So it was never really a surprise whenever somebody had passed away in my ICU. In fact, the only time that I ever actually like needed to do CPR on my shift wasn't even in my department or my unit. Anyways, so I went on a 2-week long vacation. I got engaged, had a beautiful time, and then of course came home, had to get straight to work. Well, on my first night back, I received a report from the day charge nurse that the priest was coming in the morning to bless room number 4. And at first I thought she was joking, but she was very, very serious. Apparently, while I had been on vacation, every patient who was admitted to that room had died. But as I said earlier, this was not a shock to me. People who usually came into our unit died. I mean, it didn't really faze me that much, to be honest. Also because the institution that like I worked at was very, very religious. Almost every department had a chaplain. So I just shook it off. I was like, all right, whatever. Well, then she said that room 4 was empty and it was gonna serve as a code bed for the night. Well, at around 2 a.m., I got a call saying that they had somebody to fill that bed. So, you know, we get the patient admitted and all settled into room 4. And it was a man who was about 50 years old or so, very nice, and he had his wife with him, but she looked like she was fucking exhausted. So I got her some warm blankets and I took her to another room so she could lay on a cot and get some rest. And if you guys don't know what a cot is, that's like a fold-out bed. I know you guys are probably like, Kaylee, everybody knows what the fuck that is, but hey, you never know, okay? Okay. Well, around 3:30, I'm watching the monitors, and we had cameras in each room, okay? All the patients were fast asleep as we expected, and the cameras would all cycle through about like after 3 seconds. So for example, room 1, 3 seconds, room 2, 3 seconds, and so on and so forth. And it was all on one small TV that we had on our desk. Room 1 was fine, room 2 was fine, room 3 was fine, but then room 4, there was someone in there. Yeah, and I'm not talking about the guy who's in the bed, because like obviously, duh, you know. I'm talking about there is someone in the fucking room with him. It cycled too quickly for me to get a look at who else might have been in there with him. But the thing is, the other doors to the unit were locked. So I thought that maybe like a nurse had let his wife back in or something. But just to make sure, I walked down the hall just to check. And when I looked inside, nobody was in there. So I shrugged it off. It was late. I was tired. I did not have time to deal with this foolishness. So then I went back to my desk and continued to watch the monitor. So, you know, it cycles through again. Room 1, 2, 3, and 4. And sis, I was not imagining something. There was someone in that fucking room. I swear to God. The person was standing in the corner by the window, but their figure was like covered in a shadow. Like you couldn't see any features or anything. This was one of those moments where I could not move my body because I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? What the fuck? So, you know, the cameras cycle through again, and this person was about 3 feet away from the patient's bed. Like, it's not against the wall anymore. It is like standing right by their bed. And as it kept cycling, I think it cycled like 3 more times, and every single time, whatever the fuck that was got closer to the bed. And as it got closer to the bed, the light from the hallway shining through caught the figure, but it was just still all black. So like I said, it cycled through again until this thing was right next to the bed, and I could like barely make a peep to the nurse next to me on the other side of the desk. And it was like a fucking movie. As soon as I like formed the words to tell her, the alarm on the monitor went off.
Hey.
Hi, how is it?
It's amazing, but wait, can you talk for a sec?
Signaling that the patient had gone into cardiac arrest. And the overhead system came on, and it was like, a cart is needed in CCU room 4. So people are pouring into our department. Doctors, nurses, pharmacists, respiratory therapists. They're all rushing into that room, but I'm literally frozen. Like, I could not move at all. So the cameras, they cycled through again. Room 4 came up, per usual. And this time, all the lights were on. There were 15 fucking people in that room, surrounding the bed, doing CPR and slamming meds into his IV. And someone had went to go and grab his wife. But there this fucking thing was, again, in the corner, dark figure, just watching this whole thing play out. The man ended up dying of a heart attack, sadly, and then room 4 was blessed in the morning, right on schedule. And then I decided to put in my 2 weeks notice because fuck that shit. I swear to God, y'all, if I ever worked in a hospital and that happened to me, I would have such bad PTSD. I would never want to even go to a hospital ever again. Not even for myself. Like, absolutely not. Okay, everybody, that is the end of story time number 1. Let's get on to story time number 2. Story time about the servant. I just want to put a trigger warning in here about self-harm. Nothing too graphic, but if this in any way, shape, or form makes you feel uncomfortable, please skip to this part of the video for story number 3. So a little background information. I went to a small college for women that was tucked away in an old-fashioned town in New England. Now, in my second year, I was lucky enough to get a spot in one of the oldest dorms on campus, which I know it's like, why would you want that? But listen, it was this beautiful stone building that everybody called the castle. It was covered in gargoyles and ivies. It just looked like a really pretty old castle, okay? But this castle was built in the early 1800s. Now, the rooms in the castle had been modernized, of course, but it still felt like living in a gothic fever dream type of thing. Anyway, so as a 19-year-old romantic, I loved this. I was all for it. I was just surprised that I got to get a room in the castle. But fast forward, I picked my room. It ended up being the smallest room in the building, but I still grabbed it without hesitation because, like, sis, I'm gonna be living in a castle. The fuck? I'm not passing up on that shit. So I moved in that following September and things were going great at first. I loved my classes and I had made really good friends my first year, but within a few weeks I couldn't shake this feeling that my life was on a downward spiral. Like sometimes I would just sit in my room and cry for literally no reason. I just thought about how hopeless my life was and how I was never gonna make anything of myself. But part of me knew that none of this made any sense. I was a straight A student at a good college. My family and friends were a super good support system, but I just could not shake this feeling that my life was literally doomed. That's the best way to put it. But the weird thing is like when I would go on campus and hang out with my friends or go to class, I would feel way better. Which is weird because you would think that going to class would literally make me want to just like unalive myself more than I already wanted to. But every night that I went back to my room, the sadness would eat away at me again. Soon I just became convinced that my outside life was distracting me from whatever I was going through. So what happened? I began turning down my friends like I didn't want to do anything. I would cancel on them just to stay in my room and cry all day. I started skipping class to stay in my room and cry all day and sleep. I was in so much mental pain that I actually started self-harming myself. And I had never done this in my fucking life. Like, it might sound hard to believe, but listen, when I was in this room, there was no way to convince me that my feelings of hopelessness were invalid. Like, as long as I was in that room, I felt like my life was a waste. Well, my friends noticed how bad things had started to get, so they gently suggested that I should go visit counseling services, but I refused. Because, yeah, I don't know, just because. Like, I thought that nobody would be able to help me. Until one day, something happened that convinced me to finally seek help. I was sitting on my bed the one day in my dorm trying to study. I literally just could not stop crying for the life of me. To the point where I wanted to start cutting just to make the sadness stop for like a few seconds. At least. So I closed my eyes and then all of a sudden, clear as day, I see a girl sitting on the bed in front of me. She had brown hair that like went down to her waist and she was looking down at something so I couldn't see her face. And then all of a sudden, her eyes shoot up at me and she was crying and like almost growling at the same time. And then I realized that her arms are covered in blood. And then I just had like this weird feeling that she wanted me dead.
Run, bitch! Run!
So I jump out of my bed and now there was just like this very dark mood that like hung over the room. Like the bed was empty, but I could just still feel that she was there. Now I have never been the type to believe in demons or evil spirits, but let's just say that like there was like a tension between me and this thing that just felt like pure hatred and just evilness coming from her. So I hurry up and get the fuck out of that room and I went to the RA because suddenly I just knew that I had to talk about the way that I had been feeling, even though it was probably one of the hardest things that I've ever had to do in my life. So, you know, I tell my RA about the depression and the feeling of hopelessness, also the self-harm, which that took a lot for me to admit. Surprisingly, talking to her lifted a weight off of my shoulders that I didn't even know that I was carrying. But what I did not mention was the ghost bitch. Well, when I had stopped talking, I expected my RA to be like, okay bitch, you need help, like go get some counseling. But weirdly enough, instead she asked me if I knew the history of that room.
Ain't nobody told me nothing!
Apparently she didn't want to scare me before by telling me this, but given what was going on in my life currently, she felt like I had a right to know, which I did. So apparently way back, early in the 1800s, the college had a program for students from low-income families. They could attend the college for free, but they had to work as servants to the richer kids. My room just happened to be reserved for students in this program. Well, one year, the girl who lived in my room was bullied relentlessly by her richer classmates whom she was forced to serve as a maid. I guess the stress of it all became too much for her. She ended up flunking out of all of her classes, and when the college asked her to withdraw, she slit her wrists in her dorm room on her bed, dying by suicide. So that's when I decided I needed to get the fuck out of there. So I ended up staying with one of my friends until student life could find me another room. And as soon as I left, my depression just poof, gone, disappeared. And still to this day, I'm convinced that if I had stayed in that room, I would not have made it out alive. Literally. That story creeps me the fuck out. Like, I don't know about you guys, but that is awful to think about. Okay, so story time about the House of Horrors. So a little background information, it is the 1980s and it's Halloween on a weekday, and I, being the oldest sibling, am responsible for taking my two younger brothers trick-or-treating, along with two of my parents' friends' kids who were also pretty young. Now, of course, you know, my parents and their parents are at our house enjoying their lives, playing cards, smoking cigs. Of course, because why would we want to take care of our own kids? Like, nobody wants to do that. Anyways, now me having babysitting responsibilities and chores that my younger brothers did not have. Oh, and along with missing out on going trick-or-treating with my friends, I was definitely bitter and very ill-tempered throughout the evening. Because of course it's a school night and we're just gonna go 3 blocks down the street and then come right back to my house. So, you know, we make it down one side and then back down the other when we are about 3 houses away from our home. Well, we get to the house of an elderly woman who lives alone and never gives out candy, ever. But for the past couple months, she's been renting out the basement to some guy that I've seen around a couple of times. And any interaction that him and I have ever had has been negative. Like, he either just ignores me or he yells at me for riding my bike on the sidewalk. But he was always super nice and friendly and would always say hello to my little brothers. So, you know, this guy's on the sidewalk with another guy, and there's a fold-out table set up with a notebook on it. The men tell us that they don't have any candy, but they are giving away prizes for anybody who goes through their haunted house. Well, as they're explaining it to us, a few boys who are my age from my school walk up and, you know, they're asking what the prizes are. And, you know, these guys are like, oh, we're gonna give out baseball cards, pocket knives, BB guns, just the whole 9 yards. Selling a dream to children. Well, the guys are like, so this is how it needs to go. Pretty much you guys are gonna write down your names, ages, phone numbers, and when a good time is to contact your parents to get permission to hand out the prizes. So the boys quickly fill in their information, and honestly, at that point in my life, I had nothing to look forward to that night, so I was excited about these prizes too. And because all the houses on our street were pretty much the same, I knew the layout of the basement, and I did not believe this haunted house could be that terrifying. Well, my brothers and the 2 other boys that we had with us were super excited to do this haunted house. So I fill out my information, my little brother's information, and then the other kids' information as well. And we're all about to head around back to enter the basement door when all of a sudden one of the men goes, oh, girls aren't allowed.
I said, hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Like, what type of fucking cult is going on here? And you know, of course the boys from my school are all laughing and giggling and, you know, kind of taunting me. And then of course the 4 little rats join in with them, and I just get super angry. You know, I feel that lump in the back of my throat as they're all walking away towards this haunted house. So obviously I'm embarrassed and I'm filled with anger. At that point, it was just everything. The unfairness of it all, having to constantly be expected to babysit these little brats, cook for them, clean, and do everybody's laundry for $0 and not even have a fun Halloween like every other child. Oh, and now the icing on the cake. I didn't get a chance to win anything.
I'm tired of this, Grandpa.
That's too damn bad.
So at this point, like, sis, I'm ready to flip that table over and just start destroying shit. So then I get the idea that I'm gonna take this notebook. I let the bitterness win today. Yes, I did. But yeah, I had an idea to take the notebook, which has several pages full of boys' contact information, and then shove it in the sewer drain. Because sis, if I can't win the prize, nobody can. And that's just what it is. So just then, another group of boys walks up and they ask what's going on. Of course, nobody's parents are with them because it's the 80s and people were very trusting. So, you know, I calm down, take a deep breath, and I calmly explain how this shitty ass haunted house works, about how you can win a prize and all you need to do is write down your information, which they all do right away. So, you know, I hear my group of boys walking from around the house, laughing, giggling, talking about how it wasn't even that scary. And then, you know, the men wait until this new group of boys is done putting their information in the notebook, and then they start to take the new boys back. And that's whenever, like, nobody's even paying attention to what I'm doing. So I snatch that notebook and shove it in the sewer drain, and then I get the fuck out of there. Well, the next day at school, it seemed like every single boy in my class thought that they were going to be the winner of these prizes, because literally almost every single kid or every single boy in my school had done the haunted house. And I just feel this sense of satisfaction knowing that none of these boys are going to win this prize. Like, the notebook is gone. So to me, this feels like justice, but I would never ever tell anybody that in my life in fear of getting in trouble. Well, about a week later, still no winners, and everybody just pretty much stopped talking about it. Well, fast forward the one day, mid-morning, our teacher gets called out into the hallway, and she goes out there and she talks to somebody for about like 5 minutes. And when she comes back in the classroom, she looks absolutely mortified. So each boy starts getting called down to the office, and none of them end up coming back to class. As this was happening, like, nobody had no idea what the fuck was going on until this one kid, Scott, comes back to class and he tells us everything. Apparently, this kid, Jimmy, in the other 5th grade class, who was pretty small for his age, but our fastest runner in the whole school, was walking to school this morning, and some guy rolled up on him and tried to pull him into his car. Well, I guess that Jimmy had like kicked the guy like 7 times in the face and surprisingly was able to get away. He ended up running to his grandma's house because if he would have tried to run home or to school, this guy would have caught him. Well, Jimmy also ended up recognizing the guy who tried to kidnap him as the one who had the haunted house in his basement. Yeah, so all the boys are being called down individually to the office and they're being questioned by the police, and every single one of the boys mentions a notebook. And so the police didn't want any kids to be home alone now, as most of us were after school, because in our neighborhood typically everybody's parents worked. Well, the notebook, I guess, gave those men a time frame of whenever the kids would be home alone. You know, because they said when's a good time to contact your parents, aka like when are your parents home from work. So obviously each kid filled out whenever their parents would be home from work. So now the concern was they'd have a good like guide of when to go and kidnap these kids. And when Scott told me this, I had like an immediate feeling of just like, oh shit. And no, not because I was afraid of the boys being taken while their parents were at work. I knew that wouldn't be able to happen because they did not have the notebook. Now I was scared because I was afraid that I would get in trouble for hiding it. Later on, the police went to go and arrest the men, but they were nowhere to be found. Their apartment was searched, there was no sign of any notebook, but pictures were found. As a teenager, I was finally told the pictures were extremely graphic and included violent CP involving young boys. That is fucking terrible. So now, as you could imagine, our town was on very high alert because of this situation. And that's whenever most of us kids that would just stay home alone came home to our first ever babysitter. Okay everybody, that is the end of today's story time. If you guys liked this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you want to see more, maybe hit that subscribe button down below. And if you want to know whenever I post my next video, make sure to click that bell. Also, if you want to send in your anonymous story time, or you want to know how to send in your anonymous story time, make sure to click the links down below in the description. But other than that, I will see you guys next week with a new story time.